Welcome to the Augmentation of Man with Kent and Renee Miller, where we are bringing the future.
We're going to talk about food in the times of stress.
And Kent has learned in his latter years that he is able to, through meditation, hear spiritual communication. So what we're going to do is discuss a lot of the recommendations by our spiritual guides
and
for
some,
nutrition.
Yeah, and some herbals, but not all.
We're just going to
but
touch on
basically
it.
in the foods, yes.
And then we're also going to add some of our own research more toward the end to just supplement this edition or this video.
So first thing we got to do is, which I really hesitated on doing when we first did, is get rid of the snacks and fast food. There is absolutely no nutrition in those particular things.
Yeah, and we all know they're empty on nutrition. We need to really, in these times, focus on what is going to provide us with the most nutrition, because this current virus that we have been under watch with is not the first one, according to our guides, that there are going to be more viruses, more variants, another type of flu that is going to be very deadly, and even possibly a pox. So we need to really start thinking about how to beef up our immune system through what we eat.
Yeah, because stress causes inflammation, and stress causes many diseases, which we are familiar with. So how do we eat the right foods when we are stressed about everything? We've got to lower our stress level and try to eat the right foods. And think of the foods that we need are foods that have decent amount of vitamins and protein and micronutrients and other beneficial health items in that food.
Chemicals.
Yeah.
Good chemicals, not bad chemicals. So first of all, the guides have recommended increasing our consumption of foods that are high in vitamin A. Vitamin A helps to improve our immune system, and it also helps to ward off cancer. And cancer also can be caused from a deficiency in the immune system and stress. So we need to think of not just getting sick with colds and flus and things like that, but long-term, what is this doing to our risk of getting cancers? So foods that are high in vitamin A are going to be your orange and your yellow fruits and vegetables. So that would include your orange squashes, such as butternut squash, acorn squash, your carrots, sweet potatoes, cantaloupe, grapefruit. All of those are high in vitamin A, but also tuna, broccoli, green leafy vegetables, including lettuce and spinach, are also going to have some vitamin A in it. Vitamin A is activated, however, by cooking. Most of your fruits and vegetables, the water-soluble vitamins like your B and your C, are going to be destroyed by cooking it. However, vitamin A is only activated when it's cooked.
But cook lightly, don't.
No, that's other vegetables.
Yeah.
The vitamin A needs to be cooked in order to be active. The fruits and vegetables that have vitamin A need to be activated by the cooking process or by heat.
Yeah, you can tell I'm not a chef. So
he's not a nutritionist.
Try to use olive oil instead of butter.
Right. Butter does have some nutritive value, but it may be better to add virgin olive oil because it helps to reduce the inflammation that arises out of stress and leads to disease.
Yeah. So the guides at one point recommended actually 10 ancient grains.
Mm-hmm. And
which I'm
so,
not familiar with, but they recommended it, and we began to start a diet with these particular grains.
historically, here in the United States, I think it was around the 1950s or 60s, they began to hybridize wheat so that they could increase the amount of gluten that wheat had because it gave breads this nice texture. Well, what we've noticed since then is that we have all these people today that have gluten intolerances. And is it a result of the higher amounts of gluten that now exist in the United States bread wheat program, which is 6 times more than it was before this program started? So when we return to the ancient wheats, we go back to the smaller amounts of gluten, which most people should be able to tolerate much better. And that would include spelt, kamut, einkorn, emmer, and farro.
Yeah, which you can make your own flour out of these instead of using the white flour that you buy. But you can make your own flour and put it on your breakfast, whatever you're having for breakfast, or make your own bread or whatever.
Yeah, so
spelt.
we're being told to move away from American wheat, which is a more modern food, and we're going to get into modern foods a little bit, and go back to the ancient wheat varieties.
Yeah, well, spelt has these particular special property.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to go into what the properties of that spelt is?
The ancient guides that speak to us have taught us that spelt helps to increase energy levels, and they did recommend to eat it once a week. We have learned that some of these foods and herbs you don't want to go overboard with. So some of them are meant to be eaten in very small amounts and have a beneficial effect in small amounts over longer periods of time.
Isn't spelt put on your breakfast cereal or whatever you cook in the mornings, put on afterward? It's not cooked, right?
No, you're thinking of sorghum.
Oh, sorghum. Yeah, okay.
And so sorghum is another grain that we were told by our guides that in our history, in human history, the people who knew the value of the sorghum had discouraged the common people from eating it by teaching them that that grain is for animal fodder. And so you see today where sorghum is grown to give to livestock for food, but that we are not necessarily eating very much sorghum. And so we're going to discuss this a little bit further later, where we discuss the sorghum's effect on both Kent and my heart health. So we're going to discuss that in just a minute.
Some of the ancient grains, now we're not talking wheat, we're talking grains, include canola.
Quinoa.
Quinoa, okay, it's called quinoa. Amaranth, teff, chia seed, and sorghum, as well as there's some others.
There are others. And what I like to do is about 3 times a week, because we were told to eat this 3 times a week, is I'll make a variety of these ancient grains where I cook them. I'll start with the one that takes the longest to cook, and then I'll cook it for 10, 15 minutes, and then I'll add the next one, and then I'll add the next ones. And I make up whatever you like. Instead of just one grain, I add them together because they all have different nutritive properties that can work together in combination. And once they're done cooking, then I will put this small amount of sorghum that has been ground up on top. which is only a half a teaspoon, because sorghum produces a toxic chemical when in the presence of heat. And this includes, while it's being grown, it should not be grown in climates where there is heat, excessive heat, and it should not be cooked. So we will buy the sorghum, grind it up, and then add it to the ancient grains that I've already cooked, and the sorghum is not a part of that while it's being cooked. Just a half a teaspoon 3 times a week.
Okay, so the quinoa? Quinoa, they should spell it differently then. The quinoa, the amaranth, the teff, the chia seeds, those are all, can be found now. Most grocery stores like Kroger's and HEB. And
there's some that aren't.
Yeah, but you can, if you look, you can find all those.
Well, you can find them online. If you cannot find it in your grocery store, you will find it online. And the sorghum, what we have found is that there is a farm up in, I believe it's Massachusetts, that grows the sorghum, and it's the red sorghum that you want, because they said not to eat the modern sorghum. We want the ancient sorghum, which actually they said came from the stars. So evidently it was a grain that was brought here from another planet, and so has some special properties for health. Also, teff and chia seed have benefits to the heart as well. And so what we would encourage you to do is do your own research, like we always say. And there is some conceptual learning to be had when you do that.
Yeah, so in meditation, we were led to find out what Mary's breath is. And I could not figure out what Mary's breath, so Renee did some research.
And it turned out to be
chia.
Yeah. And so that was not an easy track to follow to find that answer. Our guides don't make it easy on us, and they say they said that there is a wide variety of benefits that are to be had when we do our own research.
Yeah. Well, there's something.
And so what we want to get into now is the sorghum and what happened with our health. And that is, Ken had an arrhythmia where he was missing a heartbeat every 3 to 4 beats. It wouldn't beat. And with mine, it was more of, I had an arrhythmia where I had this racing heartbeat. And when we started the sorghum and the chia seed with the grains, with the other ancient grains, what we noticed was both of our arrhythmias went away. And so we cannot say that that will happen for everyone, but we can say that we now have, both of us have regular heartbeats, and we are not taking any medication to correct that.
Yeah, so we've been told not to eat so-called modern foods. Go back to the old ways, the ancient ways of the ancient foods that used to be eaten.
Mm-hmm. And the ancient grains, we were actually told that it would help us live longer.
Yeah.
Some of the more modern foods, they said not to eat beef. They said red meat. We have not yet clarified if that was any more than beef.
Yeah.
Like, can we eat buffalo or can we eat lamb? Things like that. But definitely beef, they said to stay away from.
So supposedly micronutrients in asparagus and spinach. We got this early on in our meditation many years ago. And we're supposed to eat it either raw or barely cooked, not cooked to death. So because it destroys their property, the values of their properties.
But what is it supposed to do?
Well, it's supposed to do a placement or assist in a placement on the protein markers within our DNA, our gene system.
Mm-hmm. And so for our DNA to be expressed, and we have all this DNA, and some of it's being expressed and turned on and working, and some of it is not. And what determines whether or not that DNA is being expressed or not being expressed is these protein markers that are on the rungs of the DNA. Okay. So what we were told was that it is not junk DNA that is not being expressed, that in ancient times, that DNA was turned off, where those protein markers were intentionally removed as a part of an experiment with the human race. We were basically put in a position of a very primal genetic expression. And then over the years, those protein markers were inserted and placed back on the DNA rungs a little bit at a time to speed up the experiment, to see how these civilizations evolve from their earliest, most primal state to more advanced states. So now we are at a period of time where all relevant DNA is going to be turned on in order to preserve the earth and what we're doing to it. That means that we are going to have a genetic upgrade to enable us to think more conceptually and to understand higher concepts.
Yeah.
And so these micronutrients in spinach and asparagus are supposed to help to facilitate this process.
Okay. If you start your certain foods early in life, it will help to correct any potential disease that is coming. There are herbal medical herbs, which Renee can go into a little bit of, but we're just going to give you a small example of the medical herbs that can help direct you in the proper health.
And in a basic way, because it is a big field, it's not anything that can be done in a 20-minute video. So what I have learned is that, well, let me back up. I always thought that medicinal herbs were very gentle, that it's something that you start at the first signs of disease and you could take a lot of and not have any adverse effects. I have since learned that some of these medicinal herbs can be very strong, very potent medicine, and that they are effective. So, for example, when I had heart arrhythmias in the past, I would take hawthorn tincture, and I wasn't particularly careful about the dosing and ended up taking too much. Well, what happened was initially it corrected the arrhythmia, but then in time caused the arrhythmia because I was taking too much. So be careful with these medicinal herbs. When you do your research, make sure that you're, one, preparing it correctly, and two, that you're taking the recommended dose, because it can be, depending on what you take, it can be very powerful and can have adverse effects if you take too much.
Especially if you're trying to take it with modern medicines that you're on.
That's
now,
right.
That can be very adverse.
So you don't want to be taking a medicinal herb that works on the heart while you're concurrently taking heart medication, because you're overdosing yourself. So be careful with it. But that being said, most medicinal herbs do not have side effects. And if taken correctly, you don't have interactions with other medicinal herbs. You can have interactions with with pharmaceuticals though.
Yes,
So you
but-
need to really do your research and find out what you were taking and what what medicinal herb does not blend well with what pharmaceutical you
and
may
you're
be
not going to
taking.
find all this in one book.
No, you need to get
There are several.
various books. I have found personally you have to have one book that teaches you how to prepare and how to preserve medicinal herbs. And then you'll find other information as far as treating specific disease with specific herbs. They generally, you won't find everything in one book. I have found medicinal herbal medicine books in secondhand bookstores. So you don't always have to spend premium dollar buying a new book,
No.
but there are some really good ones that you can find that are on the secondary book market.
Yeah, she likes figs. I really don't care for figs all that much, but she likes figs, and she planted a fig tree.
Mm-hmm. But that was spawned out of a period of time when I energetically was really low, and I had asked why or what I could do, why I was feeling so depleted energetically, and what I could do to counter that. And I was told to eat figs, but not for long term. So I think that they have a lot of sugar in them, and it's not something that you want to eat a lot of in long term, but can give you a temporary boost in the short term.
Yeah, and these big farm co-ops that have increased their production of food at the expense of no nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's more food going around the world, but a whole lot less nutrition, maybe 30% or more less nutrition in the foods that we are now eating.
And a lot of that is because they're not adequately replenishing the nutrients, the natural nutrients in the soil. We have a lot of chemical fertilizers that are being used, and let's face it, the plants don't readily take those up because they're not natural. So if you can, it would be best if you can grow your own food and be able to learn how to supplement your own soil, how to compost, those sort of things, so that you are providing the right nutrient balance so that you can have the best nutrition coming out of your food. If you can't do that, we would recommend that you buy from a small farmer who incorporates natural or organic farming methods, because they're going to be more concerned about the nutritive value of the food that they're producing.
Yeah, and we learned when we lived in Colorado that everybody was using the word natural. We were looking for organic foods, and they were saying, oh, this is natural. It's not. And we found out the word natural does not mean it is organic.
Right.
So
it may not.
Be careful.
Yeah, you need to ask questions when you go to farmers markets, because there are farmers markets where they're buying just from the regular food chain, big farm type of producers. And if you know these farmers are local, that is the best to go through something local. And you have to consider too, through the transport of fresh fruits and vegetables, if you're transporting, if you live over in the middle of the US and you're transporting fresh fruits and vegetables on a rail car
from California,
you know, you may be seeing a depletion in the nutrient value during the time that it takes to get from point A to point B. And with meats, we recommend that you get uncured and natural meats, so that they're not adding preservatives to your meat. There's really no need for it. They taste the same, and you're not filling your body with all these preservatives. One thing I do want to discuss is that the guides have indicated to us that with the over the past year, the virus that we have been trying to avoid, that worst case scenarios are primarily a result of lack of proper nutrition. That's why you were seeing that in certain groups of people, there is an unusually devastating effect within those groups of people as far as this virus is concerned.
The immune system isn't up to the peak where it should be.
And it's because, one, some groups of people are living in food deserts. And what that means is that they may only have access to mini marts for their groceries. So they're getting mostly canned foods, and there's very, very little fresh fruits and vegetables and very little variety of fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's not by their choice, but it's only by what is available to them. Otherwise, other groups of people, as a part of their cultural eating habits. And so some groups of people will tend to eat a lot of fried foods, but not eat things like salad or vegetables. And other groups of people may be more prone to eating the beans and rice and things like that, but maybe not getting a whole lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. So you really need to think about what you're eating in that line, because most of our vitamins are coming out of the fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, so with that, if you can afford it, try to buy organic milk, because the hays that are fed to the cows are usually filled with pesticides or some kind of herbicides.
Yeah.
Try to buy eggs from a local rancher that has eggs, because they eat the bugs and things that create an egg that is better in nutrition, rather than just chicken feed that these organic or non-organic co-op farms. So,
or mass
production.
Yeah, mass production is probably the worst, because it contains, actually they've done studies on the nutritive value of eggs under mass production versus chickens that get out in the yard and eat bugs. And the ones that get out in the yard and eat bugs, the eggs are much higher in nutrition.
So increase the amounts of fruits and vegetables that you're eating. Try to reduce packaged groups of materials, snacks, etc. Try to increase the foods that have higher in vitamin A to increase your immune system, to help fight off anything that's coming down the pike.
Including cancer.
Cancer. So in these times where severe polarity and great change right now, we will naturally be under lots of stress with all these changes. And we know stress will cause cancers and other diseases. So by eating healthier foods, it'll calm down the materials that's put out by the stress level in your body.
Now, the other thing is that our guides have addressed, as far as health and healing, is that disease oftentimes starts from within, and the change has to take place first from within. So if we are facing certain diseases, including cancer, in order to have a more complete healing and to reset our path, we have to start by evaluating the duality that exists from within. And when I say duality, I'm talking about the inner conflict that that we all have. Most of it is a derivative of events that have happened to us in our past, particularly in our childhood. And
those are negative things that happen.
yeah, and that can include negative thought patterns, destructive thought patterns, destructive behaviors that include eating the wrong foods, overeating, eating lots of sugar,
alcohol,
going for drugs, and also smoking. All of those things tend to be the result of this inner conflict that has not been resolved within us. So our guides have said that we need to look at why these behaviors developed in the first place, where it goes back to, how it originated, what happened to us at an earlier point in time, and try to come to some understanding and some sort of a growth in learning, although some of it doesn't seem very logical when we are the victims, but to release what does not help in our further growth and understanding, to let it go, basically. And then
it's easier said than done.
It is, but it can be achieved when you really work on it, and it takes years to conquer it. So once we come to that point, then we can reset those behaviors that cause the disease. So that once we understand where our inner conflict comes from, we come to an understanding, we let go of that does not serve us, then we start to work on the behaviors that evolved out of that situation, or situations that led to smoking, drinking, or poor eating habits.
Yeah, when we're suppressed, we feel suppressed, we tend to go towards the junk foods, the high sugar foods, and the alcohol,
or overeating, or drinking.
Escape.
So for our final notes, based on our own research, canned foods should be avoided unless it's something like pumpkin or carrots, which have the vitamin A because they're cooked. Fresh is always best. And if you can't get fresh, frozen would be like your next best. Growing your own would be better than buying it. Cruciferous vegetables are very good for preventing cancer, and that would include things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. Certain foods produce toxins when they are cooked at high temperatures.
Like
barbecue or frying. And so keep in mind that when, barbecue meat tastes really good, but when it's cooked on high like that, it produces toxins that can basically poison the body.
Eventually develop and
it can
accumulate over a period of time.
Yeah, it can lead to cancer. So we want to limit the amount of barbecuing we're doing. Potatoes, a lot of people don't know this, but potatoes fit into that group as well. So when we fry potatoes on high temperatures, it creates a carcinogen, and we should be avoiding French fries, fried potatoes, and potato chips for that reason.
Yeah, and I used to really like potato chips.
Yeah. So we kind of squashed that one. Certain spices and herbs have healthy benefits when used in the cooking. And so, for example, adding mustard seed and turmeric to foods while you're cooking them, or pickled vegetables, helps to prevent certain types of cancer. It may not be the only thing that you need to do to prevent cancer, but it certainly helps. Honey has also beneficial effects. So honey is a good substitute when you're trying to wean off the sugar.
Yeah. So when there's a virus in the air and it's going around, one thing that we learned is cutting half of an onion and putting it in the room. And just like in the refrigerator, if you put a half open onion in the refrigerator, it absorbs the smells or the foods.
Or it creates a
Yeah,
smell.
or creates smell. But it absorbs the virus that's in that room. It tends to, there's a whole story back when the virus was running wild.
It was in the 1918 the Spanish flu pandemic.
And farmers out in the outside of the city were having, some of them were not getting the Spanish flu. And when they researched it, they found out they were putting half an onion in rooms where people sat or visited or whatever. And they took one of the half onions back to their lab. They found out it was full of virus.
Mm-hmm. So the onion was actually absorbing the virus that was floating around in the air, which will help to reduce the viral load within families so that it can help prevent the spread of disease, particularly with these flus. Also, virgin olive oil and turmeric help to contain inflammation within the body. So if we know that most disease starts with inflammation, and inflammation can be caused from both emotional stress, physical stress, an unhealthy gut, poor diet, sugary foods, junk foods that add to that poor diet, high blood sugar levels, so an uncontrolled blood sugar, food allergies, and other chemicals can all add to that inflammation in the body. By using olive oil and turmeric regularly, that can help to control it, but also because stress is the major factor, reducing whatever stress you can in your life. And also, it's all in the perception of how we're looking at the events in our life. To be able to let go of some things. For example, Kent gets really stressed out when he's driving in traffic and all the crazy drivers out there. So instead of getting really angry, just realize you can't control certain things. You cannot control the other drivers. So if they are not directly
just
affecting
be
your
more aware
safety,
of what they're going to do when they cut you off.
Right.
Like this,
to be a defensive driver and to just realize that you can't control how they are driving and to just let it go. So, and that applies to other things as well.
So we look at how many things we pile on top of our bodies, the soaps, the shampoos, the conditioners,
household
cleaners.
Yeah.
They're all chemistries in the home. They're all chemicals that you expose yourself with on a daily basis. And your body absorbs many, many, many of these chemicals.
Through our skin, through our breathing it into our lungs.
So you take a look and what you're using and say, okay, if I do this every day and I use 3 or 4 items every day and I absorb it through the skin or the air, what's it going to do? It's going to add up.
Mm-hmm. And especially when we start to look at all the various chemicals that are held within the body.
Yeah.
They did some study years back on women who had newborn babies, and they tested the blood of these newborn babies and found them to have something like 120 chemicals in their little bodies at the time of birth. This means that it only came from the exposure of the mother. And so many things we look at as being commonplace, like our cleaning chemicals, like our makeup, like baby shampoo. If you look at the ingredients, you will find that it's all full of chemicals. So we really need to start getting back to natural things. When you go shopping, look for the natural cleaning
The most
supplies,
natural.
and things without fragrance, because they found that the government does not require companies to disclose what chemicals they put into their formulas for fragrance. And it was discovered that many of these fragrances carry the worst types of chemicals that are the most damaging to our bodies. Yeah, everybody likes to buy fragrance candles, and they like to buy perfumes, and they like to buy lotions with fragrance, and soap with fragrance, and cleaning supplies with fragrance. Just keep in mind
that builds up,
that if it's not a natural fragrance, like say lavender, that it's a good possibility that it's a toxic chemical composition of things that are not going to be good for your body. So we hope that we have helped you to see things in a new light.
Or scared the heck out of you, one of the two.
And maybe it'll set you on a path to more discovery and research.
Research, that's the important thing. You've got to do your own research.
And that you will find a healthier way of living that is going to be respectful of your life and your body, and bring you to a place where you feel much better too.
Yeah, I'm going to go eat something healthy now.
Thank you for joining us. And as always, peace be with you on your journey to enlightenment.